I'll find valid in your eyes. You'll always be my night sky.
Hello friends, my name is Sarah and welcome to my March reading wrap up. So for the month of March, I actually read 7 complete books and I DNF'd another book. Even though I was really close to finishing it, it just wasn't doing it for me. So we'll talk about that one last, but first, let's talk about the books I read and I will give you guys the star rating as well. In the order I read them. These aren't in like favorite order. I just, throughout every month, I just write down the books that I've completed. So this is just the order I read them in. First book I completed in the month of March was The Cuckoos Calling by Robert Galbraith. And this one was a bit of a murder mystery, kind of traditional like whodunit sort of book, and I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is set in London and it's about a private detective who is trying to find out who killed this girl who her death was deemed a suicide, but her brother kept insisting that it wasn't a suicide, that she was actually murdered. So he's investigating and he reminds me a bit of Sherlock Holmes, only like gruffer and like he's not really a drunkard, but like a few steps down from him. But he's a really good private detective and I just really enjoyed his story. It was really fun. The second book I read and completed was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and I gave that one, The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars. I wanted to give it 5, but I just don't see myself rereading it now that I know what's happened. It was really good. It got me very emotional. I got a little teary-eyed, and this one is about a girl whose father was in the Vietnam War? Yes, the Vietnam War. He came back after being a prisoner of war there, and so he's got PTSD clearly, but back then they didn't really call it PTSD. They didn't really have a name for it. They just were like, oh, he's from the war. That's why he acts like that and has dreams, and like he's just got all the signs of PTSD, but they didn't call it that back then. So he decides that the way to fix everything is to go up to Alaska. So they move to Alaska and get settled in, and she really loves her life there for the most part. Her dad is abusive emotionally and physically to her mother, but not to her. And I can't really tell you a whole lot more than that because it will spoil it, but it is a phenomenal book and you should definitely read it. I loved it so much. The third book I read was a Fae Love Story by Lone Lee, and this one I listened to on Audible and it was cute. It was kind of a modern day Romeo and Juliet. They don't die at the end or anything, but they were forbidden to be together because their families were like great rivals. And I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It was good, like I enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good as I had like thought it would be, and it was pretty predictable. But I did love hearing about all the delicious food because they both families own their own Vietnamese restaurant, and I love Vietnamese food. And I did learn a little bit of history about it. Like it's a fun contemporary book, but it has, you know, fun stuff about Vietnam and the history of their food a little bit and stuff like that. So it was a good book, just not as good as I hoped. And the fourth book I finished in March was Edge Dancer by Brandon Sanderson. This one I listened to on Audible and I only gave it 3 stars. I only read it because I had to. Well, I didn't have to, but when I started Oathbringer for the Tome Topple readathon, he specifically said in the prologue, you should read Edge Dancer if you haven't already. And I agree, you should have read it, but I didn't really care for Edge Dancer that much. It was decent. I think it's not so much the book, it's the character, because in this one we're following Lift, who is a girl. She's quite young. She claims to be 10, but I'm pretty, like, it's well known that she's a few years older than that, but she is still basically a child, and she doesn't want to grow older. She asked some magical thing to not let her get older, so she still says she's only 10. As many fingers as I can hold up, that's my age. Anything above that is bad luck. So she's also has a spren like most of the other people in the Stormlight Archives series, and I do really like her Spren. Like, he's really fun and I love his sort of ability. But her, I didn't like her very much. Like, the story was fine, but I didn't like Lift that much, so I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. If you have not seen my vlog about this, I will post it in the description. I read this for the Tome Topple readathon, and I'd say I loved it. It was a 4-star. There were moments of cringe, and the smut, though, was like fine. I didn't have a problem with it. Some people did. There were cringy moments. There was, yeah, like I said, cringe moments, but heartwarming moments. The character growth in this book was just phenomenal. I loved it. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I'm ready for the next book in the series. The next book that I read was Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, and this was obviously, well, not obviously, but this was another tome, the Tome Topple, because it is big. She's a big book. And this one I gave 4 out of 5 stars as well. There was a couple of moments in this book where I was actually kind of bored, but I also think it could be because I really pushed myself to finish it in the Tome Topple, which is a 2-week-long span, which should be more than enough to listen to 1,300-page book. But there were moments where I didn't feel like reading, and I still pushed myself to do it just to complete it, basically, which is not, I'm trying to stay away from that. For some reason, I just couldn't this time around. But this is the 3rd book in the in the Stormlight series. Like I just mentioned, Edge Dancer comes before it, but it's a novella, so it's like 2.5, and so I read that one and then did this one. I do love this series so much. Like, I think honestly the only reason I was bored a few times is because I was forcing myself to listen to a book that I didn't feel like listening to. But I love the characters, and there was character growth in here too. People discovering strengths that they didn't think they could have, and like they overcame debilitating trauma, and I just love that. I love seeing characters who come into strength that they weren't aware they had, and they surprise themselves and are like, no, I can do this. Like, I can overcome this past problem, you know, something bad that I did or something happened to me, I can overcome it. And that is one of my favorite things, I think, in books in general, especially in a book like this, because what one of the characters did was atrocious. Like, it was bad. It was an accident, somewhat. Let me just say this. He went in with the intention of killing, but not the intention of going as far as he did. He was pushed by an what did I call it in my vlog? I came up with a good word, but it was like an otherworldly, he was basically possessed, and it was just really bad, and he had a lot of guilt and like disgust with himself, but he did overcome it, and I loved that. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The final book that I completed in the month of March was The Death of Ejike, and this book was written by Oathbringer. I'm really sorry if I said that wrong. This one is just, it was a good book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. There were certain aspects of it that made me, I didn't like. Okay, it was too much, but I did love reading. This takes place in Nigeria, and it follows basically the storyline of the family of Ejike, and so his parents. He's an only child, but he has a cousin, and they're very close, and we're just kind of hopping back and forth between before he was dead and after he was dead until the very end when we discover what actually happened to him. So there were moments in this book that I just loved. It was so sweet. Seeing a character come in to their own self, sexuality wise or gender or, you know, anything like that. I love seeing someone act as who they are. But in Nigeria, that is a transsexuality is like heavily frowned upon, like more than in the US, which it's already a problem there too. But and so his parents are grappling with huge emotions, and it was a good read overall. I know I'm stumbling through my words a lot, I'm sorry. It was a good read, but it wasn't what I had expected, and sometimes that's a good thing. And overall, I did enjoy the book. It was just a few parts that were just too much for me, but I do know why everyone is raving about this book. I can see why, but it just wasn't quite for me. So let's talk about the book I DNF'd, and I know people are gonna come for me. That is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. You can see where my bookmark is. I have like 100 pages, maybe less. I'm on 203. And yeah, it's 287. I love the idea of this book. The premise is that it is this girl tries to commit suicide, and then she finds herself in a library with millions of books, and she sees a book of regrets, and she reads through it, and they're all regrets about her life. All these books are her life, her regrets, what could have been. It basically is a library of what ifs. And so the librarian is like, pick a book, read through it, and let's see if it's the life you want, because she is in limbo. She's not completely dead, right? In her actual life, she's not dead, but she's not alive either. She's like somewhere in between. And so when she picks up these books, it takes her into the life that she could have chosen just by making different choices. So we're seeing all these different lives, and at first it was really good, but now I'm just kind of bored. Honestly, I just have no desire even to see which life she chooses. I have no desire. And I'm starting a new reading challenge today, so I'm just kind of like done with it. I'm not gonna finish it. Today is April 1st, so I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are obsessed with this book. They said it's like one of the best books ever. Not to me. It was good at first, but I'm just bored. So I'm just not gonna, I don't want to waste time when I have literally hundreds of books around me that I need to read, that I want to read, that my soul is calling out for. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That is going to be it for my March wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you enjoyed them. And yeah, let me know how many books you read in March. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
When your stars have burnt out and your heart makes no sound, I'll find validity.